Welcome to The Time Capsule, stories from an abandoned and forgotten America with John Plashel, immortalizing fascinating memories through first-hand stories from those that once occupied America's beautifully abandoned and forgotten structures.
Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of the video podcast called Virginia's Abandoned and Forgotten. I am so very honored today to have a guest who I now consider a good friend.
Yes.
Eugene, let me tell you this, buddy. I've got nothing but love for you.
Thank you. I have the same for you.
I really do appreciate our friendship. And the same goes to Bob Walker over here, who I'm going to introduce momentarily. Let me start by doing the talking first, because you're going to be doing plenty of talking, okay?
Okay.
This is a really special episode, and I think in retrospect probably going to be the best one that I've ever done. I can tell you it is the one that I've most been looking forward to for a long period of time for a number of reasons.
Stories from an abandoned and forgotten
February
America
right now
with John Plashel.
I can't guarantee that when
Future
this
episodes
podcast
can be
is aired,
found on John's website,
February, but for those of you that are aware, it is Black History Month.
www.johnplashelphoto.com.
There is a property in Virginia. Let me give you a little bit of history here before we start talking to Eugene about some of his experiences at SEMA Military Academy. There's a property in Powhatan, Virginia, called the Bell Mead on the James. It's been owned by the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament since the 1800s, just up until recently, until it switched hands to a private individual. The interesting part of that property is that it was once a plantation that, unbeknownst to many, turned into a military academy and also a girls' school created by the heiresses to the Drexel fortune, old Pennsylvania banking money, that dedicated themselves to the advancement of Native and African Americans. So the irony of the whole situation there is in Powhatan, Virginia, you had a property that was once occupied with enslaved individuals that turned into this wonderful institution that ultimately graduated 10,000 African-American men over the course of 77 years. And the sister school, which I feel obligated to talk about because I'm equally as passionate about St. Francis de Sales, 5,000 young ladies. They prefer to be addressed as they should, as young ladies. The focus of this podcast will be more about St. Emma, and I'm hopeful to have some St. Francis de Sales young ladies join us in the future. But this institution was created by Colonel Edward Morrell and his wife, Louise, who was akin to Emma Bouvier. Emma Bouvier, if you recognize the last name, was a direct descendant of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. This opened in 1895 and closed in 1972. And of the 10,000 cadets, you have to figure, when you run the math, there's probably less than 2,000 of them that were able to experience St. Emma Military Academy that are still with us today, some of whom are in their 90s. For all I know, there's some centenarians that are out there, over 100 or what have you. But these men, these cadets, experienced something so special that only they can comprehend. And it was the only African-American military academy in the history of America. And it's got no recognition, zero. And what you've got today are two individuals, actually three, although Bob isn't going to be interviewed. I'll talk about him in a moment, who are so passionate about the cause of giving this institution the notoriety that it deserves, that we figure the best way to do it is to let you all hear not necessarily about the history of the school, which you will, but more importantly, the stories that occurred on campus there. And it's one thing when a third person is talking to you about the stories that I've heard peripherally. It's another thing when you're able to hear the stories directly from an individual that went to that campus and experienced the legacy of what is called St. Emma Military Academy. And we are so lucky today to have Eugene Butler, class of 1968, join us to tell his story. Not just tell the story, but what you're going to notice from Eugene, from what I can gather, is he's a passionate individual just in general. He cares so very deeply about his alma mater, as he should, that decades after his graduation, he is still attempting to scream from the mountaintops about all of the positive experiences at St. Emma Military Academy that shaped him as a man today and positively affected his life. And these are the things that we're going to hear about today, all with the goal of giving his beloved alma mater and institution, St. Emma Military Academy, the proper commemoration and notoriety that it deserves. So, that being said, Eugene Butler, how are you, buddy?
I'm fine. How are you today?
Hey, good, man. Let me start with this. Richard Carter.
Yes.
Shall I?
Go ahead.
All right. Let's tell the folks here that when I was trying to find the former cadets that went to this school, I believe I reached out to a young lady by the name of Cheryl Burke, if I'm not mistaken, class of 1970, St. Francis. I could be wrong. She connected me with Richard Carter, who I didn't know, had a conversation with, who decided to meet with me because I wanted to learn more about your institution. And Richard called you, correct?
Correct.
Correct. I remember the day when we met.
Yeah.
They had not been out to their alma mater since how long?
Last time I saw Richard was in 1968 when I graduated.
Okay.
And both of us from New York City.
Both from New York City.
Yes.
And Richard was 1 year younger than you, correct?
Correct.
It's class of 1969.
Yes.
Okay. So Richard and Eugene and I met and hit it off immediately. And just a great combination of personalities with the understanding that we were going to collaborate to bring the story of St. Emma to the public. And I was thrilled after meeting these guys because we hit it off immediately. But unfortunately, things took a tragic turn. And I'm going to ask Eugene, first of all, let's bow our head in silence in commemoration for Richard, if you will.
Yes.
A fallen comrade of yours, I'm sorry to say that, but if you want to talk to me about how that whole thing happened and unfolded, I just figured it was proper for us to mention that.
Okay. Last year, 2019, we had a reunion in Annapolis, Maryland. And I decided to attend the reunion. At the reunion, I ran into Richard Carter, who I hadn't seen since 1968 when I graduated. And Richard told me at that time that he was living in Richmond, Virginia, which myself, I had been here since 1981, but we had never seen one another. So Richard indicated to me that he was talking to another cadet out of New Jersey, that there was a gentleman here in Richmond who wanted to do the story about the Belle Meade. And that, of course, is John. In turn, John got in contact with me, and myself and John and Richard went to St. Emma for our first meet. At that meet, I found a lot of things about Richard I didn't know, and so forth, and we got a little closer at that point. To say the least, when I was at St. Emma, I was his platoon leader, and I was pretty tough on the young man. He mentioned that to me that day. He says, man, you were really something as an officer. And I said, I didn't think I was that bad, but he kind of like laid into me a little bit, but it was all in love.
Right.
It was all in love. But anyway, I was calling Richard on a consistent basis, and for a moment, we lost contact with one another. And I was wondering, where was Richard Carter? So a friend of mine he said, man, why don't you call the local hospital? Which I did. And that's when COVID was all over Virginia. And just so happens that Richard came down with COVID-19. I got in touch with him at the hospital, and we talked. We were allowed to talk, and Richard said, "Gene, I'm coming home." And I was very happy to hear that he felt that way. And look, I've been in the medical field for a very long time, and for him to say, he sounded very clear, and for him to indicate that he was going to come home, I was like elated by this. So I didn't hear from Richard for like 3 or 4 days, and I decided to call back to the hospital. When I called to the hospital, of course, they're not allowed to give you too much information whatsoever. And I just kept on pressing the issue. Where is Richard Carter? Because his mother was in New York City. I was one of the few persons that he was involved with down here in Richmond. And eventually the nurses came out and said that Richard had passed. So you can imagine how that hit me. Mm-hmm. Like I said, we had become close friends over the time that we had met since Annapolis, the reunion in Annapolis. And it just hit me very hard at that time.
Right.
But like many other cadets from St. Emma, nothing is forever. We all must go that same way one day. For Richard, it was early because of COVID-19. And I feel blessed that I am here today to share this story with you, with all of you, about St. Emma, which is special to me. Very special.
And we're gonna dig really deep into that, and that was a very appropriate commemoration. And I share your same sentiment, obviously, from further away as a third person. When I think about him and his legacy, how neat was it that he was able to experience St. Emma Military Academy before he passed?
Right.
Wasn't that great?
Yeah.
Okay. God bless.
Yes.
All right. Moving on to you.
Okay.
Okay. Tell us about Eugene Butler. Now, we're not talking about St. Emma Military Academy yet. We want to know about you. I know you're from Jamaica, New York,
yes,
right?
Jamaica, New York.
And tell us, without going into too much detail, a little bit about your upbringing and, your academia growing up, and a little something at the end about how you ended up going to St. Emma Military Academy.
I was blessed, should I say blessed and fortunate to be raised in a family that believed in education. My mother, she always would say, I've never worked for a white person in my life. From the time that she was born to the time that she died, she was a self-employed individual. She was a beautician. My father worked for the Customs Court out of One Federal Plaza in New York City. Through my father, I had the opportunity to work for Judge Landis and meet a lot of individuals in New York who potentially put me on this path to St. Emma. Well, to make a long story short, I had a cousin who also went to St. Emma. And I came down to a Thanksgiving parade. And I was just overwhelmed by what I saw. These individuals who were basically teenagers were carrying M1 carbines and rifles, sabers, were dressed in dress uniforms, were marching with the precision that you would find in the armed forces of our country. And I looked at these young men and I said, oh my goodness gracious, I want part of this. And so my parents asked me, do you want to go to school here? And fortunately enough, and as I say, I was blessed, a lot of my family members, cousins and so forth, went to private schools. And the last two was the gentleman who I talked about who went to St. Emma, who was a year ahead of me. He was a sophomore, I was a freshman, and, I wanted what he had. And so I came to St. Emma Military Academy from New York City. And boy, did I have an eye-opening experience.
Now, we're going to talk about that. So your parents did not force you to go. It's my understanding from talking to former cadets that there were a mix of reasons as to how cadets ended up there. Some of it was voluntary, like you. It sounds like you really wanted to go, and your parents were mindful of that and said, let's do it. Richard, on the other hand, and several others said that they went to the military academy because they needed that structure.
Right.
Maybe we're getting into trouble somewhere else, and that was the best thing for them, right? So would you agree there was probably a mix of that?
There was a mix of individuals at SEMA. Some of the individuals who came there were sent by the juvenile system in different cities. New York being the largest contingent of students there at SEMA, followed by New Jersey, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Michigan, North Carolina, South Carolina, California. We had individuals from Africa. We had from all the states I think about. We had an individual from those places. But yes, some of them got in trouble in their home states, and they were either going to a juvenile or go to St. Emma for the discipline. And a lot of them chose St. Emma.
So did you know at the time coming, I'm assuming you were inner city in Jamaica. Is that Queens?
That's Queens, yes.
That's Queens, okay. Did you know you were going to rural Virginia, basically in the middle of nowhere?
I had no idea that I was going to be back in the woods. I don't know. When I think about it, we're going to talk about Father Figueroa.
We'll talk about him, yeah.
But they used to say 30 miles in Plum. And it was 30 miles in Plum out of sight, back in the woods in Powhatan, Virginia. And I would never think that I would end up in those woods back there. But it was a heck of an experience. Yes.
So just for the audience, St. Emma Military Academy, in the theme of what we're talking about, was largely demolished in 1972. If you talk to some people, they say it's for taxes reasons. If you talk to others, they say it was for liability reasons. But there are remnants of the campus, including the original mansion built in 1840s from the Confederate general that lived there, that Eugene is going to talk about. His Civil War historians call it the Belle Meade Mansion. Cadets call it the Big House, and we're going to talk about that. The Big House, as pretty as it is, Eugene's going to tell you it's not where you want it to be.
Right.
And there's the granary that's still there, and obviously we got the New Boys Club that's there. Unfortunately, the Old Boys Club is demolished, which is a shame. But my point in telling the audience this is the campus has by and large been raised, and you're going to see some pictures of what it used to look like here. We've got some vintage images provided by Eugene, and then Robert Walker, who is class of 1965, who's watching us and observing today. A beautiful, beautiful campus, leveled, gone. That basically, with the exception of a few buildings, a couple cemeteries, an old granary, a dam where the cadets used to swim. What's left of it are the memories that you're going to hear today. All of the cadets from St. Emma have different stories. All we can do right here is hear Eugene. So I'm going to ask you, because you must have been 14, maybe 13 years old as a freshman. You keep telling me you were a little guy.
Yeah, I was a
Talk to us. Talk to us specifically. I know I'm digging deep here, but talk to us specifically about what you recollect from the first day of arriving at St. Emma Military Academy, including how you got there.
Yeah, my parents. My mother is from Dinwiddie County.
Okay.
Okay, so that was our summer vacation. A lot of times we would come down in the country. So I wasn't that far removed from knowing about what the country looked like, all concrete in New York City, come out to the country. I have cousins in those areas, and so I know a little about hanging out in the woods a little bit, So I get on campus at St. Emma, and my first day, I'm 13, maybe 14 years of age. I'll say 14. I was about 4'11", 5 feet.
Oh, my God.
Maybe weighed 100 pounds. And I'm on this campus, and I'm looking around, and I see all these guys and these cadets walking around. I could see the new people because they were all in civilian clothes. And so I'm there with my parents, and my parents are talking to one of the priests there on the parade ground. And I'm standing there looking around, and this upperclassman comes past me, and he looks me up and down, and he says, "Man, don't get scared now. Just wait till your parents leave." And I looked at this guy, and I said, "What the?" And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, man, what did I get myself into?" Well, it was tough. It was very, very tough. My freshman year, it took a lot getting used to the military way of doing things. As a recruit, or as they call us, the new boys, we meant nothing to the cadets. We were like lint in someone's pocket. That's how they looked at us. Okay, we had no privileges whatsoever. Okay, God, it was on the parade ground, which we call the blacktop, which is in the center of the campus. As a new boy, you weren't allowed to walk on the parade ground. You must double time on the parade ground. In other words, you must run on the parade ground. And if some upperclassmen stop you, you must jog in place. You could not walk on that blacktop. Okay? When you were called to attention, no, let me go back a little bit.
Sure.
That first day was get a haircut, get a military haircut. So they scalped us bald. You know, and back in those days, this was 1964 that I came to St. Emma. I had a fro back then.
4'11" with a fro.
4'11" with a fro. That gave me 5 feet, maybe 5'2", and so forth. But they cut it all down. You know, you couldn't have any facial hair whatsoever. And then they proceeded to give us drilling, taught you how to drill, how to stand at attention. And as a new boy, or as a recruit, they called us, when you stood at attention, you had to brace. And bracing was taking your chin and put it into your chest. And you would have this ugly look on your face like this. This would all be like someone, an old man, was bracing like this. Well, you couldn't even talk to people who would try to talk to you. You had to brace when you stood at attention. When you went down to the cafeteria, they would call you to attention in your seat, okay? And you had to brace at attention in your seat. And then when you got your food, you had to square your meals off without looking at the spoon or without looking at the fork. Can you imagine trying to get some peas and corns on a fork, and you had to square your meals without looking down? And if you would look down into your plate, then you would hear it from an upperclassman. Someone's going to be in your ear. So you try to avoid those type of things that first year on that campus. You know, drilling was difficult as well. Some people didn't know the left from the right. And they were kind of clumsy. Well, I tell you, after an upperclassman would get into your ear and show you how to do it over and over again, and then you still didn't get it, now it was a situation where you might find yourself in a little situation where it might go from PTs, which are punishment tours, and they can go from standing in front of the chapel, and we have the picture of a chapel here with us, and on the chapel, front of the chapel, there was a clock. And the chapel was made out of the stone that came from the
quarries, right?
Right, from the quarries on the
property.
On the property, yes. And they would require you to stand at attention with your rifle and look at the clock and count the bricks on the chapel. And they would actually come back and ask you, what's your number? And if the number didn't match up to their number, they make you stand there longer. Now, that's without you knowing how to turn left or go to left face, or right face, about face, how to carry a rifle. You know, when you got your rifles, it was about right shoulder arm, left shoulder arms. Don't move your head. Take your rifle around the head, but don't move your head around the rifle, and so forth. And they would really push this on you every single day. Drill, drill, drill.
So forgive me for my ignorance, but were you more susceptible to this as a freshman? So when you're coming in your first year, you're I'm assuming coming from public schools in 8th grade.
Right.
You had probably a great summer doing what normal middle school kids do. You're enamored with what you're seeing from your cousin.
Yes. Yeah.
His military, right? Did it have
Yes.
anything to do with what the girls thought of him?
Well, I don't know about that. Yeah, well, in some cases it did, but it was like he was in uniform and the girls liked the uniform.
Right.
But I'm be honest with you, my first 2 years I wanted to kill him.
Well, I'm trying to get the audience to understand when you show up here, we can envision you 5 foot tall, soaking wet with a big afro, thrown into a barber's chair. And next thing you know, you got a rifle in your hand and you're counting stones on the chapel that is no longer there. So what I'd like to know is, was the experience of the first couple weeks of St. Emma Military Academy what you expected, or was it much more difficult than what you expected?
Yeah, it wasn't what I expected.
In what regard?
I had been in the Boy Scouts and Explorers and everything like that, which was a organization that requires you to have policies and procedures and rules and regulations. St. Emma took it to another level. Okay, because we had to go through inspections through the armed forces, and there were certain exercises that you absolutely had to know because you could lose your star. We got a star from the National
NDCC,
Defense,
right?
The NDCC, National
yep.
Defense Corps of Cadets. And you would get a star on your uniform that says that you have passed inspection. And that inspection came from officers from the military.
But what did it include? What would they be looking for?
Do you know your general orders?
Okay.
Your military general orders, which is something they do in the armed forces today. Do you know how to carry your rifle correctly? Do you know how to present arms, order arms, parade rest? Do you know the rules and regulations or code of conduct of the academy in which you are attending? All those things was something that they would ask us questions about. And we would have to stand at attention when they went through inspection, took the rifle out your hand, and visualize them snatching a rifle out your hand and looking at the rifle, looking at you in your dress, okay? Being well-groomed was something that was very special about wearing that uniform. Your gig line. Your gig line is where your buttons are on your shirt, down to your zipper. They had to be straight down the line. And your belt buckle, which had to shine like a mirror. It was made out of brass, and we would shine that material, shine our insignias so that people would glow and so forth. Your shoes had to be spit shined. Everything that you saw in the military, and this, you gotta remember, this is 1964, so we were not any different than the military itself, except for we were teenagers. And you had to absorb all this as a teenager, which is difficult to do. It takes a certain kind of individual to be able to handle that type of discipline that they threw on you at St. Emma. Oh, my goodness.
And it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, let's say on average, and these numbers are probably approximate, that there were, and I know it varies per year, I want to say at peak there were probably 400 and some change cadets at any given time. So let's say 100 cadets in every incoming class.
Okay.
I just assume that when you enter St. Emma, you stay. But I was quickly informed that there are several freshmen that couldn't handle the heat.
They sure couldn't handle it.
So talk to us about that.
Well, unfortunately, they would try to run away. They were, and the Belle Meade is 2,200 acres of land, with St. Francis on that same property, sitting right on the James River. Okay, so where were you going to go? You couldn't get across the river. We're so far back up in the woods. Okay, and I mean, you can get to the river, but you can't get across the river. And the only way you can go is walk through those woods to Route 60, which takes you out to Powhatan from Richmond. Now, we had some really brave individuals who really tried to get to Route 60 and tried to get home because they couldn't deal with the heat of the kind of discipline that they threw on you at that school.
And that discipline, you're getting it from multiple angles. Not only do you have the military discipline that you basically, as a 14-year-old boy, got basically punched in the head with, like, oh my goodness, what have I got myself into? Mm-hmm. But you also have what I can imagine to be significant academic rigor.
Yes.
Right?
Oh my goodness. We study so much. My goodness. Study hall every single night. Saturdays. Saturday was the only day I don't think we had a study time, if I'm remembering correctly. Study hall was Mondays through Friday, it all depending on if you were going to St. Francis or not for your social, which we'll talk about. Mm-hmm. And that was part of it, because you had to learn not only the academia, but you also had to learn the trade that they offered at the school.
Multiple options,
correct?
Yes,
the trade involved, and I'm a lot older now, so I can't remember a lot of things.
That's okay.
But some of the things I do: electronics, upholstery, tailoring, shoe repair, plumbing, auto repair, masonry, and carpentry. Those were the trades that we. And matter of fact, that trade center at Saint Emma was the largest trade center on the East Coast.
And let me stop you there for a second. This is really important for the audience to understand, is that the school, the institution itself, was founded in 1895 under the premise of the Booker T. Washington academic curriculum, which I believe, and don't hold me to this, was originated at what is now Hampton University.
Yes.
And that was an atypical academic curriculum. It's not you didn't have just history and then English and math and all this. The thought was for post-Civil War African American students that the way that they were going to be empowered after being educated was through trade, and it was actually founded as an agricultural and industrial institute, right?
Yes,
with military overtones that basically morphed into a full-on academic military academy.
Yes.
So even in the 60s, you would have these types of trades that it's like it wasn't like you just had math and then you went to English and then you went to history. You got your hands dirty.
Yes, because every day, and I will talk about the schedule, but every day, when it came to class, you were either going to be in class with that, academic class, your history and your math and your sciences and so forth, but you also go down to the trade center and so forth. And during the time I was there, I started off with upholstery, and I learned how to actually sew together couches and put together the wood and so forth to make chairs and couches and stuff like that. I went from the upholstery to shoe repair. So I was taught how to sew and put on heels on shoes. And then as a senior, I was in tailoring shop. And I'm telling you right now, and I don't know if it's bragging or not, but I can handle a sewing machine better than some females can.
That's awesome.
I mean, this is what they taught you there, because they want to make sure that although you were going to, either you're going to go to college, you were going to the military, or you're going to take that trade and exploit that trade and make something out of yourself. That's what St. Emma was about. They wanted us to achieve where so many people were trying to achieve, but this gave us the foundation to achieve.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can envision coming in as a freshman that it was enlightening to you, to say the least, that this is the real deal. You probably didn't understand that as an underclassman. Were you not just like in a survivalistic mode? Let me survive this so I can work my way up the food chain and become an officer, and we're going to talk about that. Mm. But were you trying to just get by early on?
Yeah, basically. My freshman year, I was trying to survive my freshman year. And as I spoke before, my relative, my cousin, He was tougher on me than other individuals. And, you know, by the time he became a senior, he was a captain. And so if they didn't like him, and I'm coming in as they're a sophomore, he's a sergeant or whatever he is, and then captain by the time he became a senior. If they didn't like him, who do you think they're gonna look at?
Right.
I caught holy, you know what, because of my cousin. I really did. But it was all, I'm going to say this right now, it was all in love, but I still wanted to kill him every time I saw him during the summertime. Oh my goodness, you know. But it was, you know, it was one of these things, it's like the rite of passage.
Right.
There are certain things you have to achieve. And I wanted to survive because I didn't know that I was going to stay there for 4 years. I really didn't. I tell you, look, I'm very honest about me, you know. I wasn't a scared person. I would stand up for what I believe is right. I will fight for what I believe is right. I can handle a lot of things. And I learned by being at St. Emma how much I could handle because I tried to stay out of trouble. I didn't want an upperclassman to take me behind the chapel.
So you got to hear about that. I always said you said that in jest, but when you say an upperclassman take you behind the chapel, it was kind of with a wink and a nod that Father Figaro, who is going to be my next question, all was not harmonious amongst the ranks, correct? It's my understanding that if someone stepped out of line, or maybe even not, if you were an underclassman, you were probably susceptible to being pulled aside. And I don't want to say beaten down, but I am going to say messed with, maybe
chastised,
something.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, and not necessarily if it happened to you or if you were the one doing it, but for us non-military background folks, we like to think that we know that stuff happens, and Father Figaro probably knew that stuff happened, but you experienced that stuff.
Yes.
It's behind the scenes. Why and when do cadets mess with other cadets when they're not supposed to?
When you're so awkward that you don't know your left from your right. The sergeant in the first sergeant or your squad leader is telling you left face, and you're going to the right. He's telling you right shoulder arms, and you can't get the rifle from the ground to your shoulder. And after they've told you over and over again how to do it and have demonstrated to you, it comes to the point where, well, as an upperclassman, you get frustrated. And so when you get frustrated, you're gonna make it known to that individual what you don't like. And so, as I stated once before, you can have PTs. You know, punishment tours come from standing in front of the chapel counting the bricks, or walking around the campus with that rifle above your head.
Which can't be easy.
It's not. That rifle was 9.5 pounds, 9.5 pounds. It was an M1, and you're carrying that above your head around that parade ground. And Father Frigo would just look at you and say, keep on moving, because the word from him is just tough. You got to take it in order to, that rite of passage. This is what everyone goes through. However, there were times that the upperclassmen didn't want to see that the priests know what was going on. Okay? And if they got frustrated enough with you, they take you behind the chapel and teach you in a very, not in a very positive manner. I'm going to put it that way.
Black eye and a fat lip kind of stuff?
Well, the black eye and the fat lip will could get you expelled.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it really could.
Okay.
Okay, because you never go to anyone's face. But that's not to say that 9.5 pound rifle doesn't go to that toe.
Oh.
Or to that shin.
Oh.
Okay, or that elbow in the chest that you didn't see coming, and it came from another country, it seemed like, when they hit you. Oh yeah.
Were you ever the recipient?
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
Did you ever dole it out too?
Heck yeah. Yes,
I got you.
Like I said, I'm an honest person.
Yep.
By the time I was an upperclassman, it was my turn.
Yep.
It was my turn, and I ended up being an officer.
Yep, we're going to talk about that.
Okay, but
now I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
what were you gonna say?
no. It's just that was the right. Like I was saying, it was nothing malicious.
Right. It was just part of what happened.
Of a growing. It's like joining a fraternity. The way they used to harass people in the fraternities,
right?
Until all that harassment stopped. And back in the 64 to 68, yes, there was harassment. Yes, you're going to get that rifle on your toe. Yes, and you might scream bloody murder, but you didn't take it no further than that. Right in that platoon where everyone saw what happened, except for those individuals who are administrators didn't see it. And no one reported no one, and when they did, those people who reported someone for doing something like that, well, it just made life more difficult. And as we was talking earlier about people running away, they were running away because of the fact they didn't expect that type of discipline.
It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the running away would get you expelled. Is getting expelled the same as dishonorable discharge?
In some cases, it is. It is. And go ahead.
And I guess we won't talk about it too much. I'm going to, maybe allow him to tell a story at some point. But Father Figueroa, which is going to be my next question to you, by the way, made an exception to the rule with one individual, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
But for good reason.
For good reason. And I won't mention no names.
That's fine. And
so forth. But it was an individual who was in my class.
Yeah.
And because of circumstances in his home life, he ran away.
Yeah.
And they allowed him to come back into school. They didn't give him a dishonorably discharge. Most of the times, if you ran away, we never saw you again, except for when it dishonorably discharged, when that particular ceremony happened. I hate to call it a ceremony, but when those events happen, everyone's going to see you get expelled from the school, from the academy.
And that's a testament to Father Figueroa for understanding that situation. And
yes.
We keep referring to Father Figueroa because he's such an integral part of your experience. And to most, Father Figueroa is synonymous with St. Emma Military Academy,
Absolutely.
Right? But shame on us, we probably should have mentioned something about him prior to. But I want you to paint the picture of Father Figueroa, or as some people call it, Father Fig, correct?
Yeah, we call him the Fig.
The Fig. So talk to us about him as much as you can.
Father Figueroa, I will tell you what I know. I know he was born around 1925 or 26, and he's a Trinidadian. He's from Trinidad.
Okay.
His parents lived in Trinidad. They moved to Atlantic City. Father Figueroa, he died in July 1999, if I'm not mistaken. He spent 20 years at St. Emma. He was, and I had to write this down because I had forgotten some things.
That's fine.
And I have to refer to my notes
Please
on this. Father Figueroa was the dean. He was a commandant of cadets. He was assistant principal. He was an instructor. But most of all, he was the father that we didn't have back up in those woods. He ruled with love and compassion. But I'm telling you one thing. He was only about 5 feet, maybe not even that tall. Okay? And if he weighed $130, he was more than I realized. But I'm telling you right now, he had a brisk way with his vocabulary, with the way he expressed himself. Very articulate, very educated. But the words that he threw at you when you were in trouble, you did not want to go over to the big house, which is the mansion at Belmead, to see Father Figueroa. He demanded that respect. He earned that respect. And you can talk to any graduate from St. Emma or St. Francis, and they will talk about Father Figueroa in reverence, because the way he treated us, no excuses. was no excuses. He didn't care what it was. The word was tough. Deal with it. Okay? He wasn't there to grow children. He took adolescent boys from all over the country and turned them into men. And that's what is so fascinating about this story. And when I think about it, and I go back and I say, you know, I am in my 70s now. And I go back to when I was 13, 14 years old at SEMA. And I look at what we did and what we accomplished. And I said, oh my goodness, man. We were teenagers. And it's because of Father Figueroa, because of the way he was dedicated to us, that we were able to achieve. You know, you talked about the 10,000 individuals who came through. I mean, when we talk about public schools, the numbers may not be that great, but over 90% of us went to college. Okay, when it was a time when they said that young black kids could not deal with a college education, that what you needed to do was to go to a vocational training, that you didn't deserve to go to a college because you were not intelligent enough. Father Figueroa was different. He told us, yes, you can. You could be better than anyone else. You can do this. You just got to be focused and disciplined. And don't take no excuses. No excuses. And this is what I learned from him. That in spite of all my ups and downs in my life, I was able to rebound from the difficulties that I've had. Rebound from it, and today be proud of the things I have achieved.
Largely as a result, at no disrespect to your parents, because I'm sure they were so very important in your life, but
absolutely.
from what I'm hearing from you is Father Figueroa and maybe some others there really played a big role in your development as an individual that we still see today.
Yes. Well, you gotta realize, how much time did we spend at home? We came home Christmas and during the summer. The rest of the time, we was back up in those woods, isolated. He was a black priest during the time that there weren't that many black priests. He was aware of who he was and aware of who we were. And so with that, he wanted to make sure that, yes, it's going to be tough. But no matter how tough it is, you are going to be able to handle the tough things that you come across in life. And you're going to be able to thrive. That's what it did for me.
And I'd imagine many of, if not all of the cadets that graduated from that institution probably share your same sentiment.
Yes, they do.
Including Robert and
Yes.
many others over there, that the Fig was, he was important to you.
Yes.
For more reasons than one.
Father Figueroa was something. Edbert Joseph Figueroa.
I love Delmar's imitation of him. He had some kind of a, I don't know if it was a dialect or he was nasally or something.
He had a high voice, and you know, you could on the loudspeaker on the campus, if you heard, I would hear Lieutenant Butler report to the office. Like, oh my God! What did I do that I have to go see Father Figueroa? So nobody wanted to go to the big house,
right?
To see him.
So again, when we're talking about Fig at the big house. The big house is the Belmead Mansion, which is still standing, and that's where Father Figueroa lived, and it is not where you wanted to be because that meant you were in some kind of trouble.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to well, I want to know about your daily activities from sun up to sundown, and also, if you don't mind, incorporate a description of dormitory living. If you don't mind. So classes, if you can recall or if you need to refer to your notes, we'd really love to hear a typical day at St. Emma Military Academy. Okay. But also with some color about what it was like in those dorms.
Well, our typical day, I wrote my notes down because, like I said, and I had to go to Bob Walker, and I said, "Look, Bob, I can't remember everything. So will you please help me?" You know. So anyway, it was like Monday through Thursday. Actually, we got up at 05:55, and I'm not gonna refer to the military time. I'll just use regular. 5:55 was rising. 6:20 morning prayer. 6:30 mass every single day, and I got to say something about this mass.
Well, but back up for a second.
Yes.
Morning prayer. What was that? Where was that?
Prayer to just basic prayer when you get up out of your bed in the morning.
So you're still at your bunk,
and you're saying morning prayer,
and that's all it is. You're not assembled on the blacktop.
No,
at that point.
the morning prayer, rising morning prayer.
Gotcha. Okay.
Then you go to mass. And I'm telling you right now, after 4 years of standing and sitting kneeling and standing and kneeling and standing, I said, "Oh, I had enough of this kneeling and standing, please." You know, so, you know, it was all part of going at St. Emma, but it was oh God, for me, I'm a Baptist. I was born a Baptist, and to go into Catholicism or the Catholic school was kind of difficult for me to deal with how they handle the ministry in a Baptist church compared to how they do it in the Catholic church. But anyway, at 700 we assembled, had breakfast at 7:10. At 8 o'clock it was time to go to class. Either you were in the class or you went down to the trade center to go to shop.
Okay.
11:35 was recall. 12 o'clock was we assemble and we go recall, and then we go down to lunch. 1 o'clock, back in class again. From 1 to 3:35, which we had recall again, and then we had football practice. And then at 3:45, we had drill. It was time for drill, about those things I told you about.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Oh, yeah.
And band practice at that time. I spent my sophomore and junior year, I was in the band. I played clarinet in the band. And Bob was in the band as well. And it's something that I didn't even know this guy. I didn't even know Bob.
But you were there a year? You overlapped a year?
I came in 64. He was going out in 65. But we were there, and I have a picture of us in the same band, and that goes to show you I didn't even know him. And so because I'm a nobody. I was a nobody. And so he was junior, senior.
Right.
And so his class was graduating, and I'm a freshman.
Yep.
They didn't deal with us.
He was too busy doing his thing in the old boys club.
Exactly. So at 4:30, it was policing the buildings and free time. And then 5:30 was the end of football practice. At 5:45, it was retreat, okay? At 6 o'clock, it was dinner. Then at 6:30, it was office hours. And office hours were like, if you want to see the nurse, the chaplain, or go see Father Figaro, okay? If you had been called to his office for whatever. And then we had at 1900, which is 7 o'clock, we had assembly again. At 7:30, they distributed supplies, and it was study time.
We're in a library?
No, in the classrooms. And
okay.
I'll talk about the classrooms in a moment.
Okay.
In the classrooms, and then and then return back to the classes. After classes, it was a little free time again. And then at 9:10, it was showers. And about 9:45, 10 o'clock, it was lights out. This was every single day, Monday through Thursday.
Not Friday. Oh, Friday. That's right.
Friday, the difference on Fridays was, hey, we got to go to St. Francis.
Well, we're going to talk about that, but
Okay.
I want you to first mention how great was it. The one benefit of military living in that dormitory is that you had private showers and private stalls for the bathroom.
Wait a minute. Hold up. Let's step this back a little bit. There was nothing private about St. Emma when it came to bathroom usage.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, so the showers was wide open. There was no separation in the stall. So if you had to sit down and do your business, you were sitting down next to 15 other guys doing their business.
Isn't that something?
And that's the way it was. And, and I know that in the military itself during those times, that's the way it was in the military.
Absolutely.
In the barracks.
Yep.
Okay. And they did everything basically like a military barracks. And so, but this was a dormitory. In the locker rooms, everyone had lockers. We had locker rooms. Okay. And you would have everything in the locker had to be perfect.
Justin Claver Hall?
No, Morale Hall.
Morale.
And Claver Hall and the Ag building, the agricultural building. 3 buildings that we had dormitories in. Okay. The locker rooms basically where you took care of your business. You know, you shower, you shave, whatever you have to do. You groom yourself. Okay. You have make sure that's where all you do. Or you work on your uniform in the dorm.
Which, by the way, Bob has graciously given us. I believe, Bob, is this your actual uniform here from class of 1965? It's my understanding it is.
Yeah, it
correct?
is. Yeah, I believe.
So,
yes.
The camera can see it now. If not, you're going to be able to see it afterwards. In addition to multiple pictures of the campus from back in the day when you were there, we've come prepared, thanks to Bob, with some pictures but nonetheless, carry on.
So upstairs on the Morale Hall, Claver Hall, second, third, fourth floor, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they were dormitory. Everybody's in bunk beds, and you're about maybe 3 to 5 feet apart, all one level, everybody right next to each other. Okay, so if you snored or someone snored real bad, you couldn't do nothing you could do about it.
Hit him over the head with a pillow?
You better not hit the wrong person. You might have some trouble going on. That's for sure. And then but I must say for my freshman year, I had gone to the military as well after I finished St. Emma. I went to the military. And I didn't see any difference, basically, how it was in the military and how St. Emma was. It was ran the same way, dormitory, living the same way in the barracks and so forth. It wasn't really, it was comfortable, okay? We had, on the campus, we had a TV room. And like I was telling Bob, Bob and I was talking the other day, he says, man, how many times you looked at TV or the 4 years you at that school?
I can tell you one.
I know one time I did.
Tell us about that. When Eugene Butler misbehaved. Tell us about it.
It was a night and for all you folks who are in your 50s and 60s or in your 70s, you might recall this. It was when Lou Alcindor played against Alvin Hayes.
It was Alvin Hayes.
It was UCLA versus Houston. Both of the schools were undefeated. And I was an officer at that time. It was in 68.
So you were allowed to watch TV then, correct?
Heck no. Okay. After lights out, we're not supposed to be up. We're supposed to go into bed.
Okay.
And there was behind Claver Hall, which is a large dormitory and an academic building, there was a Quonset hut that had a TV in it. And so as an officer, we all got together and said, look, man, we're not going to miss this game, man. We're just going to have to deal with the consequences. So we're all watching the game, and we're out there, we were raising holy you-know-what down in the Quonset hut. And we went through the whole game into the fourth quarter. The game was almost over. Houston beat UCLA. That was their first loss under John Wooden and so forth, who was an undefeated coach. And we got a knock at the door. And the door swung wide open, and who's standing in the door? I'm glad it wasn't Father Figaro, but it was Father Weller, another priest who was there. And he took all of our names and turned them into Father Figaro. Mm. Now, there was about 3 company commanders in there, about 5 or 6 first and second lieutenant, and the first sergeant. Now, of course, they weren't considering busting us down, but because somebody has to run the campus
right.
and so forth. And so they made us do PTs, and our PTs were for a week. We had to carry rifles at night after everyone had gone in. They were doing free time, and after everybody had gone in, we had to march around the blacktop, the parade ground, with our rifles. And you could imagine these officers Man, we hadn't carried rifles since we were juniors. And so we got rifles slung on the top of our shoulders, dragging rifles all over the place. But it was fun. But that was the one time, well, I've gotten in other trouble before, but but that one, Father Figaro says, okay, do the PTs. But it was a delight because, you didn't have time doing the rigors of the day from sunup to lights out. You didn't have time enough to do anything except for what was on that schedule. And this was the one time we had an opportunity to go off schedule and do something different. Well, we've done a few things, but
from Monday through Thursday. From Monday through Thursday.
Yes, Monday through Thursday. Now, I'm going to talk about Fridays.
Well, before we do that,
okay,
that's a whole different conversation I want to have with you. But when you're telling me this stuff, I still maintain that there is a documentary in the making for St. Emma Military Academy.
I hope so.
Documentary in the making. The story behind its genesis and what it accomplished. So many beautiful things to come out of it from the people that graduated from the institution. But there's also some tragedy.
Yes.
And not everything is rosy, right?
Correct.
And there was an incident that you talk about that I think the audience would like to hear because I believe Frazier was in your class,
yes,
correct?
He was.
Can you tell us about what happened to Frazier?
Yes, Frazier, class of 68. Unfortunate incident that occurred for him. We were all going to the mess hall. I think we had already received our cadet. After the Thanksgiving, you're no longer a new boy. You get your torches there. You become a cadet. And I'll talk to you.
Yep.
Anyway, it didn't matter about that. You're still a freshman or a sophomore, or whatever the case may be. And when someone calls you to attention, or they call the battalion to attention, you better come to attention. And Frazier was the type of individual, great personality, funny guy. And they called the battalion to attention, and I think he had a smile on his face, or he was laughing about something. And another upperclassman saw what he was doing and, came behind him and struck him in his chest, okay? And Frazier went down. He went down, and he was unconscious. And it was outside, I was there, but I was inside the cafeteria. I believe they were outside the cafeteria because I've talked to other cadets who were there, and they said, man, I was standing right next to him. We was outside the cafeteria. Others, I've heard two stories. Others say they were inside the cafeteria. When he went down, he hit the table. And others say he was outside the cafeteria. He went down. He hit the ground. He was unconscious. They put him in the car and took him back on campus from the mess hall, which was a little distance, but not long. No one was going to carry him up there, so they put him in the back of a car from one of the staff members and took him to the infirmary. And I think it was around 7 o'clock that night. Father Figaro called for emergency assembly, and they pronounced him as deceased, and so forth. And yes. As a matter of fact, my yearbook I have is dedicated to him. There's a picture of him in the yearbook I have in front of me.
How did that affect you? And so what was it your senior year? Is your junior year?
No, I think, let me think about it.
Anyhow, I mean.
I think of my sophomore year. I think it was my sophomore year when this occurred, And, as a sophomore, your privileges are, minimum privileges that you have. You don't have to run on the blacktop any longer, but you're under a lot of discipline then,
Yeah.
And so laughing when you're supposed to be at attention, the guys didn't play that. No, you're not going to do that. You're gonna follow the rules and regulations, okay, as we set forth for you. And it was unfortunate this incident occurred. What can I say? I feel for his parents, they lost a son. you know, and you would think that, you know, and it's the way any parents lose a child, you know. You send a child off to college, you send a child off to boarding school, and you think everything's going to be all right, and you find your child has died for whatever reason. But this happened to Frazier, and it hit me, you know. I knew him, you know, but it was after, you know, after you grieve, it's right back to the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's right back to, hey, what are you responsible for? Why are you here? Okay, you're here to get the diploma, that military certificate, that trade diploma, and that academic diploma.
All three.
Yes, all three. Yes, you would get all three graduating from, and that's the one thing I miss to bring with me is my diplomas. Okay, because they were really well structured, very well put together.
Let's switch gears here for a second. Rest in peace, Frazier.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's move to something that I've been wanting to ask you about, because we know that life changes for you a little bit. It eases up for you on the weekends, right? Because you are given free time, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it's been a blessing to get to know about a half dozen of the young ladies of St. Francis. And as we mentioned at the outset of this program, St. Francis de Sales, you can see the logo behind Eugene there, was the girls' school that was started by Catherine Drexel, who was Louise Drexel's direct sister. And she annexed property 4 years after the original creation of St. Emma Military Academy. At the time, it was the Industrial and Agricultural Institute, and opened up a school for girls, which started in 1899, closed in 1970. And these were the young ladies that cross-pollinated every now and then with the cadets. Yeah. And there was some commingling going on, right? Like socials, correct? It's my understanding that despite the fact that the bridge that connected the two campuses now that was over Deep Creek flooded out a few years after you left, I believe right before the campus closed, if I'm not mistaken. It's debatable. I haven't quite figured out if it was 70, 71, 72. Eugene Motley would know. If you're listening, Eugene, I'd love for you to tell me exactly when, because you actually told me the name of the storm. But nonetheless, there was a bridge that you all would cross to get to see these young ladies during the weekend, during socials. And I bet you that was a pleasant reprieve from the day-to-day rigors of St. Emma. Right? So can you tell us, did all 4 classes go on one day? Did you break it up on another day? Would they ever come to you? Do you always go to them? And what did a social look like? Okay.
Fridays and Saturdays, those were our social times.
Okay.
On Friday night, freshmen and sophomores. On Saturday, juniors and seniors. But you have to remember, there was like 360 of us per se on St. Emma's campus, but there was only
25.
Yeah, 125 young ladies at St. Francis. So when we would go for socials, they had to break the men up, or the guys up, into 2 groups, okay? And we would march over, and you know, everybody's getting themselves together. You know, it's that night they say, oh, my goodness, I don't have to talk to a knucklehead tonight. I get a chance to have a conversation with a lady.
Were you nervous as a 14-year-old going over there and dancing with a young lady?
I'm from New York. Are you kidding me?
Okay, I got you.
I'm a party man.
Okay, I got you. That answers that.
Okay, so
right.
No, it was easy for me. You know, I don't know how it was for anyone else, but I was ready to go. And we get over there, you know, and the ladies are already in. There's a large Quonset hunt that they had.
Still there.
Still there. Yes.
And you would march.
You would march from St. Emma to St. Francis.
How long would that take you? Approximately 20 minutes?
About 15 to 20 minutes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Uphill.
Yes.
Well, downhill and then uphill.
Uphill, downhill.
Yep.
We didn't care. We didn't care what was going on. If it would have been snow, sleeting out there, we were going over St. Francis to talk to the young ladies.
All right.
But anyway, so that Friday for my freshman and sophomore year, I would go over there, and when you are freshman and sophomore, you don't get much play.
That's right.
You don't get much play from the ladies.
Right.
And so like your gift of gab, I like to say, because that's an old way of putting things. Your gift of gab would have to be really out there where they say, oh, well, he's something special.
Did you have the gift of gab?
I could party.
Gotcha.
I could dance and so forth. And so that made the difference for the conversation. But I learned the conversation as I got older, you see. But anyway, you would go over, you'd march over, and you go into, the ladies would already be in the Quonset hut sitting down. And they would say that we would march into the Quonset hut, and every other seat would stand at attention until they gave us the order to take seats. And then they gave the order to take seats, and we sit down. And you could be sitting next to a lady. Most times you would, ladies be on one side, you be on the other. Okay, they were really strict, man.
The nuns,
yeah.
The nuns had it at this point, right?
Yes,
the nuns were overseeing everything.
There were no. It might have been one priest over there, Father Philbin. Because he was the person who handled a lot of the administrative things for St. Emma and St. Francis. Okay, he was the, if you want to say, the go-between person or whatever you call it. But anyway,
gotcha.
You get over there and they tell you to take a seat, and then they start playing the music. And back then it was, I'm a New Yorker, so we was doing the hustle, and so the dance was called the hustle, and the guys from Washington D.C. was swing dancing and stuff like that, and we would just party, and then they throw a slow side on. Now, that was complicated in itself.
How so?
Because if you got too close to a female, the nuns would walk up to you and tell the young lady and tell you, back up.
What was that distance like?
It was,
18 inches?
Yeah, a little less than 18 inches.
A foot and some change.
There could be no body connection whatsoever. Okay.
And if there was?
They're gonna separate you. Now, they don't want to have to tell you 2 or 3 times to do it, because they have to tell you 2 or 3 times the cadet is gonna sit and he's not gonna party and the young lady's going back to the dormitory. Okay. I mean, there was times that you could get away with certain things, but you would have someone looking out for you. How
could you help yourself, man?
Well, it was
tough.
I'll say this. It took discipline.
Yep, there you go.
It took discipline to handle the things that we handled there. And then on Saturday night, it was junior, senior night, and so forth. Those individuals went over, they would get a chance to talk to the young ladies. The guys who were left on campus would go to see a movie, or they had free time until we came back. Because we come back at, we party from 7 to like 10. By the time we got back, because, you could talk about the walking distance, okay? So by 7 to start over there at 7, you might have an hour, hour and a half of party time, and then it was marching back to the campus.
At night.
At night, but we didn't care. Or you could talk about, man, did you see that honey, man? Oh my God, she was sure looking good, And so it was like that, man, And then as you mature through your years at St. Emma, you get to get closer to the young ladies.
So let me ask you this. Say there was a young lady there that looked good.
Mm-hmm.
All of them, from what I can gather, seem to be pretty darn attractive to begin with.
They're pretty ladies.
And Eugene Butler is an upperclassman, but you're a junior
mm-hmm.
with rank.
Yeah.
But you got a senior that's got his eyes on the same girl.
Oh, boy. That's not going to work out.
To your disadvantage.
To my disadvantage. Yes.
So rank mattered as it pertained to asking the ladies to dance.
They did. The purpose of going over there so we can have some kind of social affair going on with the opposite sex. Okay, although everything was very restricted. Okay, if you have a female, they have a right to say no, but the nuns, see the individual walks up to one of the ladies and constantly tell them, I don't want to dance, I don't want to dance, they went, what's wrong? We brought you over here so you can socialize with someone else, okay? Because they are around females all day long and nuns all day long. Like we're around around the knuckleheads all day long, and we have to rebound the priests and so forth. And so when that time to separate and get with the young ladies and have a conversation or to dance, it was time. It was right for you. But seniors, and especially officers, oh yeah, they went after that officer because they in some cases the senior young ladies became sponsors. Like our companies were A company, B company, C company, band headquarters. We would have a sponsor from St. Francis who would be the cadet sponsor for that company. And so all the young ladies want to have an opportunity to be the sponsorship because they get an opportunity to come over to campus more so than just the regular socials. And so you get a chance to intermingle more with a person of the opposite sex. And so it made a difference to the young ladies as well. There are a lot of, well, I won't say a lot. There are some individuals who married the individuals from St. Francis.
Interesting. I always wondered about that. And some, and we won't talk names, but aren't there some that have rekindled their relationships just recently?
Just recently, yeah.
How awesome is that?
Yeah, after 40-some years or more.
Yep.
They rekindled their relationship, thanks to me. But anyway.
Were you the matchmaker?
Yeah.
Oh.
I wish I wasn't, but but anyway, it was one of those things that it was important to us to have that connection with the ladies, and they were wonderful, intelligent ladies.
Oh my gosh.
You know, they came from all walks of life and so forth, and so the conversation was always good. You know.
Let me, and again, I'm going to shout out to St. Francis. I'm hoping to get a young lady on this podcast eventually, working on that right now. But much like my interaction with you and the other cadets, so overwhelmingly positive. I'll use Peggy for example. Mm-hmm. The way she carries herself, it's almost with reverence.
Absolutely.
And polished and classy and elegance, and her articulation is such to where I think that institution too taught those women how to be ladylike.
They did. That was one of the things that you had to learn all setting tables.
Yes.
They would ladies would talk about that. Having conversation, you said being articulate.
Yes.
You know, and they were elegant, articulate ladies in every stretch of the imagination. That's what they were, and so they like to enjoy themselves too, and do different things. You know,
those stories. I know I don't share them with you a ton, but I'm also privy to that side, and we'll keep that because this is about St. Emma. But I wanted to make mention about them because it's just it's a positive thing, and they were integral to your experience at St. Emma.
Yes,
to a certain extent. Now you weren't going over there every weekend, correct?
Did I go every weekend? Well, when I was a freshman and sophomore, I didn't go every weekend. But when I was a senior and I was an officer, I was going over there every weekend.
So
because I had a lady friend.
Okay.
And that same lady friend I had over there, when I would go home, she was from New Jersey, from Montclair, New Jersey. And so when I would go home during the summertime, we would get together during the summertime.
Interesting.
And so forth. So there's some of those relationships. The relationship we talked about earlier, the matchmaking relationship, they would get together in the summertime as well because, a lot of us, we would talk to ladies who were from our geographic locations.
Correct.
You know, if you were from New York, you'd try to find a New York lady or a New Jersey lady or a Washington, D.C. lady. So in the summertime, we had a lot in common because of where we are located during the academic year. And so it made a difference for us to continue our relationship during the summer,
during the summertime.
When school was out. Yes, absolutely.
Now, thanks for sharing that with the audience. That's awesome. I know a lot of people wanted to know about your interaction with St. Francis. It's not completely clear how that cohabitation corrected, you know, occurred. I want to switch gears again.
Okay.
I understand you were a track star.
Yeah, I was daggone good. God, man, I was good.
Now, were you allowed to be an athlete and in the band, or did you have to choose?
I had to choose.
But you were both.
Yes. Again, my cousin was he was captain of the, you know, he was a platoon leader. He was a band leader. And so for my cousin, his name was Ernest Epps. And a lot of the cadets who were doing the class of 64 to 68, they knew who he was and so forth. And, you know, they knew who I was. But it was a joy to be in the band for those years, from my freshman to my junior year, because had an opportunity to go to New York every year. And, I had to get a chance to march in the 369th parade in New York.
Is that the one that you won? You were no longer invited because you won it every year?
We were invited anywhere, but every year. But Father Figueroa decided in 68, in my senior year, not to participate in the competition of marching and drilling because no one could be as close. I mean, we were top of the line when it came to those things. And we'd go to New York. They were the Hellraisers, the Harlem Hellraisers from World War I. Okay, the 369th. And we'd go up and we'd be in the parades. Our parents would come, all the New York chapter would come down to see us. And the band would go, the seniors would go, and the drill team would go. And we would put on a show.
By bus is how you got there?
Yeah, we went by bus.
By
yes,
bus. Okay.
Yes.
Was that the time in '68 when you snuck out the night before?
Heck yeah, we all snuck out.
And y'all were dipping into the booze?
Yes, we had a good time.
Were you feeling it the next day?
We had a good time. we go up there and I don't know if Bob had an opportunity to go because it's 65. I don't know if they were still going to New York, but from 66 to 68, we went to New York and we would stay in a hotel downtown, and we would have our uniforms on. And, so we get on the subway or we get on a bus and the women are looking at us, oh, you in the military? And we're like, yeah, we're in the military, hon. What's up? And so the conversation, and they liked us because it was a uniform. Plus, we were kids. I was 17, 18 years of age. But it was a requirement that everything was about mass. Okay, so Saturday night we would go and hang out, and lights out was supposed to be like at 2100 or 2145, and no one was supposed to get out. Well, we got a big hotel. We don't see Father Figueroa nowhere around or no other priests around. We're sneaking out. I'll never forget this. It was a group of us that went to this place called a cave. It was It was in Manhattan. And the women were all on us, and we're partying, having a good time, and we're drinking. We're drinking and having a good time. The next morning, we had to be in St. Patrick's Cathedral to see the. I think it was the Archbishop or the Cardinal. If I remember correctly, we'd be in mass. We was in mass, and some guys were trying not to get sick in mass because our parents were sitting behind us, and so forth. And guys were using a hat for whatever they had to use their hat for, and so forth. And then after we finished with the mass, we had to go to the garden on the side of the St. Patrick's Cathedral and be introduced and kiss the Cardinal's ring. Yes, man. I'm like, oh, come on, man. And then we would have the parade.
Right.
And after the parade, we would go to one of the famous restaurants in Harlem, and we would eat, and then we'd get back on the bus, the James River bus line, and come back to Richmond.
Isn't that something?
Yes, that was a senior trip, and we did that for 3 years in a row. But we were so good with our precision marching that Father Figueroa decided our last year not to participate in the competition because we were winning every year. No one could touch us.
You would probably make everyone else look silly.
Yeah, because this is what we did every single day.
And switching gears for a moment, when in the track, you'd compete back then if you think about some of the schools and the track meets, there's some of those schools that are still there today.
Oh,
Maggie Walker was a lot different back then.
Yes.
Armstrong. Benedictine.
Benedictine.
Yeah.
Maggie Walker. Armstrong. Peabody.
Not familiar with that one.
Petersburg.
Oh, okay, okay.
Petersburg High.
Yep.
Okay.
Was that Moses? Was Moses Malone?
Yeah, Moses was one of those schools
one of
right
those
there.
years,
Our competition was all the public schools and, of course, all the Catholic schools. As a matter of fact, I found out through my research that we were the first basketball team to integrate a black basketball team in Virginia area, in Virginia.
Isn't that something?
We played the Catholic schools. All the Catholic schools were white, okay? We were the first one to integrate the basketball teams. I mean, not the basketball team, but basketball games in Virginia. SEMA was. And I was reading this in the newspaper they had, that we were the first to do this.
When you ran track and did the long jump or whatever, I remember vividly.
I did five events. I was good enough to go, and most African Americans know of the pin relays that are held in the Franklin Field in Philadelphia. And for 3 years in a row, I was invited to participate. You had to be invited to go up, and I was invited to go up and participate as a competitor in those events. So I was real. In Virginia, I was one of the tops in Virginia. And so forth, as far as high, low hurdles, high jump, broad jump, 100 meters, and 100 meters and 200 meters, yes.
Remember, we walked as we were reminiscing, and you were saying this is where the athletic field was, which was right next to the ag building.
Yeah.
Which I think was as far as you probably went on that campus, right? You didn't deviate pretty much down near the piggery or the granary or anything like that.
Well, the only time you went to the piggery is when you was assigned. Because we would get assigned to work in the farm,
yep,
and so forth, shoveling, you know what. But anyway,
and tell the crowd about long jump, which you ended up landing in.
Well, you would go to these campuses, these high school campuses, and they have all the foam and all this kind of stuff, and we would jump into the sawdust. Man, I was like, oh my God,
literally, right?
Yeah, literally jumping into sawdust and so forth. Because I mean, it wasn't like it costs $1,400 a year to go to St. Emma. And our parents had to buy uniforms and all that stuff. That excluded the uniforms, the books, and all that stuff. So it was $1,400 just for admission to the school and so forth, And then you got to talk about travel and transportation and all those things involved. So it wasn't like they had a lot of money for athletics. It really wasn't, And so when they put these athletic teams, we're dealing with 360 guys. Well, public school is dealing with thousands, of kids, or 800 kids that would come out. All these kids would come out for these athletics. We didn't have the pick of the litter, let's say that, but we were good for what we.
But you got by.
We got by, and we did very well for ourselves.
One thing I forgot to ask about Father Figueroa, and I want to ask, is he had. I don't want to say an assistant, like Roland. Mm-hmm. There was a name, right? Not commandant.
Like Roland's position?
Roland's position in his relationship
with Father Figueroa.
Like Father Figueroa. Weren't there cadets that were handpicked by Father Figueroa to be basically his right-hand man or to help him with daily things?
Daily
activities.
Adjutant.
Adjutant, that's what it is.
Roland was his adjutant. Roland was in the platoon with me. By the time he got to senior year. See, Roland also was an altar boy. So he had an opportunity to do some of the things that I didn't, because I wasn't Catholic and so forth. And so Roland had a chance to work directly with Father Figueroa. He would bring the mail down when we were seniors. He would bring the mail down. He would talk to Father Figueroa about certain things. He knew the intricate things about Father Figueroa that I didn't know.
Including his choice of liquor.
Yeah, which was scotch.
That's right.
Yeah, it was scotch.
I forgot if it was Maurice or one of those guys told me. So one of y'all got in trouble.
Yeah,
went in and stole it from, I think he had it, he stashed it, if I'm not mistaken, in the basement of the big house. Well, someone went and hid it. and no one stepped up to the plate to admit it. So I guess everybody got PTs.
Yeah, and that's what you do. It's it's all or nothing at that point.
Talk to us about obviously in the '60s there was some racial tension going on in the U.S. Right?
Yes.
I was born in '69. I wasn't really privy to that. I grew up in a colorblind society, black, white, yellow, don't matter. Didn't see it a whole lot. You're getting a lot of that now. Obviously, it's resurfaced. Unfortunately. But we've had conversations before where, you're an African-American military academy out in the middle of nowhere, so you're almost on your own little island. So despite the fact that in the mid-'60s there's some racial tensions going on, am I correct in saying that you're largely insulated from it? And when you would go home and back into that as a civilian for the weekend or whatever, you almost didn't see it a whole lot because people saw you in uniform, right? And instead of, anything negative, it was like, thank you for your service. I see your, so you were largely insulated from that growing up.
Well, of course, I have experienced it myself in years, all the older years, doing civil rights movement.
Correct.
And I'm glad you brought up that point, because I received my first membership card with the NAACP at St. Emma Military Academy. Yes, I did. I'll never forget, they came, a group of lawyers. I think it was my freshman or sophomore year. A group of lawyers came to speak to us about joining the organization, and a bunch of us joined the NAACP. I'll never forget that. That's my first card. But being on that campus, yes, it did. It isolated you from a lot of things that was going on in society at that time. I can remember that I had a cousin that come down from New York, and he was traveling, and he wanted to take myself and my other cousin, who was at St. Emma, out to lunch, and he asked Father Figaro, was it okay? And he said, yeah, just have him back at a certain time. And we went over to Midlothian, which is close to Powhatan. And we went out to, and this is 66, 67.
Yep.
And so forth, and we know how the racial tension was back in those days, but they saw those uniforms. They knew exactly where we were from. Okay?
And a little bit of
yes, it was respect. Yes, it was respect, because look what if they think about Powhatan, and you think about that trade center that was at Powhatan, one of the largest trade centers on the East Coast. It handled a great deal of the farmers when they had things that had broken down, that needed repair. That's where they came to get things fixed, at St. Emma. So we had a reputation. And a lot of the faculty members came from that Midlothian, Powhatan area, black and white, and so forth. So I never had that racial tension there. I did have it other places, but not when I was at St. Emma.
A lot of Powhatan locals that I speak to told me that they would come to the St. Edward's Mass on Sunday. So that chapel, that church, was not specific to St. Emma Military Academy. It was on your blacktop and on your property, but a lot of the parishioners were community parishioners, correct? Yes. And they would say it was such a neat Sunday because they would go to Mass either before or after you. I can't remember which it was.
It was after.
After you, but they got to see the cadets marching.
Yes.
So they would go to Mass and then see the cadets marching. And that beautiful cemetery that's tucked away back in the woods back there is from St. Edward's.
Yes.
And is, I'm assuming, probably named in commemoration to Edward Morrell.
Yeah.
As was
the water tower.
The water tower. We haven't talked about the new boy versus the old boy.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
When you're a new boy, as I said, as a recruit, there's a place you can go to get away from your upperclassmen. And it was a smoking area. And
which was fine back then.
Yes.
Cigarettes were great.
Yeah, everybody was smoking back then. And the guys, I've heard you and some other folks who weren't familiar with it, they mentioned it as a bandstand and so forth. Yeah. But we called it the New Boys Club. The Old Boys Club was a water tower with a plaque on the front of it that said to Colonel Morrell that he was the first established the school in 18, when he established the school and who he was and so forth. And so the old boys would smoke on the tower, on the water tower, because you had cover when it rained, okay? But the new guys, there was no cover over there. So, but guys would go over there, no one would mess with you. It was your free time, and just to get away from that, someone always in your ear about you didn't do this or you didn't do that, and you can talk to your other cadets who are freshmen or who are sophomores and find out what's going on with them. Or did they get a package from home and so forth? When they send a package from home, it always, everybody would crowd the packages at home because, in fact, they wanted some of that food. Your parents are sending cakes in and all these other things. So, yeah, it was a time to get away from the rigors.
And you'd buy your cigarettes at, was it commissary or Morel Hall?
No, yeah, that was the, I believe we get cigarettes in there. I didn't smoke. I wasn't a smoker because I was an athlete.
Got it.
At the PX.
PX, that's right.
PX,
in Morel Hall.
In Morel Hall, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just so the audience knows, when they say water tower, first of all, the New Boys Club and the Old Boys Club were basically right next to each other.
Yeah.
God forbid a new boy walk over to the Old Boys Club.
Yeah, you would hear it. Well, what are you doing over here?
Yeah.
And it gets straight very quickly.
Architecturally, even though this isn't what you were thinking about when you're 16 years of age, that water tower was beautiful.
Yes, it was.
Claver Hall's gorgeous. The chapel was gorgeous. And that water tower, we're not talking about a typical water tower like the one that exists down there near the athletic field. And hopefully we may have some pictures if Robert brought them where we can show the group what this tower looked like. I found that it was duplicated from another tower, I want to say up in New England, Rhode Island or Connecticut or something like that, but probably a lot bigger than we can appreciate too. It was decent size, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very large. It was very large.
And that's where the old boys, the upperclassmen would congregate to smoke.
Yeah.
Couple more questions before we conclude. It's a travesty, in my opinion, that St. Emma Military Academy does not have the notoriety and recognition that it deserves as not just the only African-American military academy in the history of America, but when you look at it comparative to how that came to be on the grounds of a former plantation that empowered 10,000 individuals like yourself to become successful, productive members of society is a phenomenal story. There's no placard. There's no memorial. There's nothing out there in any museum, despite repeated efforts from a number of alumni like yourself and like Robert and like many others that want to see this happen, and at St. Francis for that matter. Why that is, it's beyond me, and I know that what you and I do is all comes back to changing that mentality and hoping that someone's going to see this podcast to help us give that school its place in history, right? I also am mindful of the fact that you all were a brotherhood. You've probably got friendships today that have lasted forever, and you share a special bond that only 10,000 individuals in history were ever to share. And we talked about maybe 2,000 of them or so still being alive. And that's a really, really special thing. And it's okay if you get emotional here, but I want you to say, let's assume you've got some of your fellow cadets watching you. Your passion for your school is palpable, and I think at your age it's admirable that you are continuing to pursue what is right, and that is that St. Emma Military Academy somehow has an appropriate place in the context, not just of African-American history, but in history in general. And you're doing everything we can possibly do to get it, including this podcast and telling your stories, which have been just a joy to listen to. But speaking from your heart, what would you tell your fellow cadets right now and or the general public as to your thoughts on commemorating that school in the appropriate manner? Take your time, man.
Yeah. It's been a long road. I've talked to many alumni. And it's exhausting that you get to the point where you are frustrated because there's a legacy of St. Emma and St. Francis. But why, with the significance of these two institutions, or the institution period of St. Emma, why isn't there anything there that says the school ever existed? Nothing. With all the 10,000 of people who have graduated from that school, who are or have been productive citizens, from lawyers to doctors to actors to congressmen and women, to educators. We have all been productive in this society. Not that it's all been great. It's a lot of ups and downs that we've been through. But for this institution not to be recognized for the contributions to this country is a tragedy in itself. So I continue to fight. And I've been fighting now for a few years. There are others who have been fighting as well. And I wish people would just stop for a moment and stop looking at and I know it's almost impossible, to stop looking at the financial part of it and look at the contributions of the individuals who come from this school. We talk so much about fatigue. I remember they were talking about COVID-19 fatigue, and we started saying, well, some of us have Belmead fatigue, but we must continue to fight for what we want. We just can't let this die because there's not too many of us left to tell the story. A lot of us, like you said earlier, 80, 70, at least 60 years old, because school closed in 72.
You got to figure 68 is probably the youngest cadet, late
Yes.
60s.
Yes.
Yeah.
And look what, just if people would just look at it. We're trying to get into the National Museum, Smithsonian of African American Culture in D.C.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
I've been trying to work on that, and it's exhausting, but I'm not giving up. I did this podcast because the story needs to be told. And the only way it's going to be told is from someone who cares. And, I try to do my best to help people understand how important this is to us as African Americans, especially during this month. And so I just say, look, let's continue to fight. Let's not get frustrated. Let's not let obstacles stand in our way. Those obstacles that we can knock down, let's knock them down. We need to come together And that's the most important thing. We have different organizations out there right now representing alumni. We need to bring our alumni organizations together. Bring them together and really shoot for that goal that is there.
Man, your perseverance is so admirable. And that of your fellow colleagues. Your emotion says it all. My emotion says it all. I'm hoping this podcast makes a difference.
Yeah.
If anyone out there is listening, all they want is a platform. They want an audience to talk to that can help them achieve their goals as former cadets. For their institution to be commemorated as it so properly deserves. And now, at the very least, this podcast, as I told Eugene before we came in, we're going to look at this as a time capsule. Time capsules of yesteryear were notes that were buried in a bottle that were dug up 200 years later. This time capsule for Eugene's descendants, his great-grandchildren and his great-great-great-grandchildren, are going to be things like YouTube and iTunes, where they're going to be able to see you and hear you tell this story and those stories of that so very special time in your life, to be a part of that brotherhood and that very special place called St. Emma Military Academy. God bless you. God bless Robert. God bless all of the cadets that are out there. Thank you so much for everything.
But hold up.
I was going to say, I'm going to give you some final words. Go ahead.
Okay. No. Thank you.
Yep.
You've been sticking with us.
Yep.
Ever since I met you, you have pushed hard so we can achieve something. Yep. You really have. And God bless you, man. Thank you for everything you've done.
Happy to do it. It's a passion of mine. Yeah. To be honest with you, I wish I was a cadet myself. I think I was born about 20 years too late.
Yeah.
I'm jealous of what you experienced. I wish I could have been a part of it.
We can take you back now.
This has been so profound and meaningful to me and to the masses, and I just hope that this just goes viral and is the catalyst and the springboard that we need to achieve your goals. Yeah. Do you have anything else you would like to say?
Hey, alumni, give John a call, participate, give me a call, give Robert a call, and let's bring this thing together and do what is necessary for our alma mater.
There we go.
Yeah.
And that caps the first episode of Stories from an Abandoned and Forgotten America, and it was a doozy. Thank you, Eugene.
Thank
you, Robert. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you for listening to The Time Capsule, Stories from an Abandoned and Forgotten America with John Plashel. Future episodes can be found on John's website, www.johnplashelphoto.com.